Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today is Monday, October the 5th. We are now officially within 1 month until the election. That is why today this is going to be our 1 month out 2020 presidential election prediction video. Our most recent video was our Senate election prediction video. This one is going to be our presidential election prediction video. A lot has changed since our last one, our 40-day slash 5-week set of videos, so we're going to get right into it. Again, as I said, as we get a little bit closer to the election, we're going to spend a little less time on some of the safer states and really deep dive into the closer swing states. So let's get right into it. In the state of Hawaii, there's really not much to discuss. This is going to be an easy win for Joe Biden. In the state of Alaska, it is worth mentioning that there are two other statewide races here that are keeping this thing, they're sort of keeping this state in the news a little bit. There's a lot of campaigning going on between both sides. The Joe Biden campaign, through some various leaks and things of that nature, have classified the state of Alaska as a competitive state. So that at least gives you some inclination of what they think they're going to be doing out there. The Lincoln Project, of course, has also taken out some ads. A little bit surprisingly, in this state, they raised a ton of money very quickly, and it was a little surprising to see them allocate some resources into this state. But for what it's worth, maybe it'll affect the margins just a little bit. I'm going to label this, though, safe for Donald Trump. State of Washington is also going to be safe for Joe Biden, as will the state of Oregon and the state of California. All three of these states have been big, I guess you can call them sites of racial injustice protests, and of course awareness on issues of that nature are almost always going to benefit the Democratic Party. The only thing I think that the Republicans might want to consider out here in California is that there is a slim possibility that they could pick up they could make a few gains in the state legislature out here, because some of the COVID-19 measures and those things running concurrent with some of the measures that have been taken to fight the wildfires have been very restrictive. And as a result, there might be some moderates kind of over here in the Fresno area that might take a little bit of an issue with that. And as a result, the Republicans might be able to make some gains in the state legislature, but probably not enough to flip either branch. You get the point. Now, we have mentioned before how Nevada is going to be a closer state than it already is. And people sort of lose sight of the fact that Nevada is a closer state than people think. It's sort of often thought of as a safe Democratic state, and some of the prognosticators do not even label the state of Nevada as a swing state, which I think is a little wrong, considering they labeled New Mexico and Colorado as such. I do not think that those should be swing states, but Nevada isn't. The Democratic Party has in large part taken a stranglehold on this state, in that they've finally flipped that Senate seat with Dean Heller. That's one they've been trying to get for a long time. They managed to get it done with Jackie Rosen. That was a big Senate win for the Democratic Party, because across the board the rest of the night, in 2018, they had a really bad night. They lost a senator in Florida, Indiana, Missouri, and North Dakota, while not winning pickup opportunities in Texas, Tennessee, Ohio. But they did manage to pick up one in Nevada as well as Arizona. So those two pickups basically helped put the Senate in play this time around, and obviously this time around it's very much in play, far more than it was 2 years ago, even though the Republicans have more senators than they did 2 years ago. But part of the reason the Democratic Party has done so well in this state in recent years is because they have a very large turnout machine here, probably one of the best turnout machines out of anywhere in the country. And let's not forget, the Republican Party usually gets over 45% in this state, so there's not too big a margin for error. It's right around where Michigan has usually been for the Democratic Party in recent memory. So I still think it's going to go Democrat. I'm not going to label it safe. In fact, I'm not even going to label it likely. Okay, I am going to label this lean, because the turnout machine is going to be affected by COVID. Idaho is going to be a safe Republican retention. We've mentioned before how Paula Jordan, who ran for, I believe it was the House seat 2 years ago, who's now trying again for Senate, she's sort of the name to, she's sort of the one name in Democratic politics in the state of Idaho, other than the mayor of Boise. It's been a little bit notable to see the Democrats elect a mayor of the only urban area in the state of Idaho. But with that said, there's really nothing to discuss on the presidential level, really, or the statewide level. I apologize about that. Let's get reoriented here. Okay. Now, in the state of Utah, it's going to be very interesting to watch the final margins here in Utah because while obviously it's still a safe GOP state, there are a lot of factors that are potentially going to impact the final margins in the state of Utah. First of all, there were a couple polls that had Joe Biden within 3, 4, 5 points. Does that mean he's going to win? Absolutely not. It's Utah. However, the fact that we can combine those polls with the fact that Mitt Romney has all but endorsed Joe Biden altogether and has been one of the few GOP senators to directly, deliver some pushback to President Trump, as well as the fact that Evan McMullin in this state, who, remember, got 1 out of every 5 votes in the state of Utah in 2016, he has endorsed Joe Biden. So 2 very beloved political figures in the state of Utah, Evan McMullin and Mitt Romney, have either entirely endorsed Joe Biden or have said they will not endorse Donald Trump, which of course is basically an endorsement for Joe Biden. So all of that combined with the Republicans, I think correctly taking this, with some complacency and probably not investing much at all here. There is a House seat right here in the Salt Lake City area that the Democrats picked up in 2018. Remember, Ben McAdams was able to unseat Mia Love, barely, but did. And so far it looks like Ben McAdams is going to retain that seat for the Democrats. All those different things I just outlined, the polling, Evan McMullin, Mitt Romney, and that House seat, I think are a reason to believe, also with some general unpopularity of Donald Trump, I think is all reason to believe, and all goes to say that I think Joe Biden will perform better than expected here. I think he'll even get around 40%. I'm even willing to say that. I'll probably end up having to eat those words, but we'll see. So just as a margin characterization, I'm going to label this likely. Now, in the state of Arizona, there's been a lot to unpack in this state. And it's shifted very dramatically in only about 4 years. Remember, this is another state that was quietly closer than expected in 2016 when Hillary Clinton came within 3 points of Donald Trump. And remember, this has been a Republican bastion, this state, for a long time. This is John McCain country, okay? This is Jeff Flake country, John Kyle. This has been, where a lot of very, very prominent GOP figures have resided. This is sort of a base state for them, and it's quickly becoming a realignment state altogether. Part of that is there are now more House members in the state of Arizona that are Democrats than Republicans. That, goes to show you that, as a result, that combined with state legislature gains for the Democrats show you that the state is clearly shifting. There are now, in all likelihood, going to be 2 Democratic senators from the state of Arizona, because this was, as I said earlier, the other pickup that the Democrats made. It wasn't called until a few days after election night because the counting here was very, very, very slow. But Kyrsten Sinema, by the way, an openly bisexual woman, defeated Martha McSally, who, of course, was appointed by the governor, Doug Ducey, to run for the other Senate seat, the special election that is now up. By the way, quick note about that Senate race, and we'll break this down a little bit more in our next Senate election prediction video. That is a special election. Okay, so if Mark Kelly wins, and all signs point to him defeating Martha McSally, he does not have to wait until the new term to be seated. He can be seated in a lame duck session, and that combined with now 3 or maybe even 4, I'm losing track now, of Republican senators coming down with coronavirus could maybe throw the nomination and confirmation of Amy Barrett into a little bit of limbo. It'll probably in all likelihood still happen, but it's worth mentioning. So as a result, that combined with steady polling, the fact that just a poll today had Joe Biden up considerably in the state of Arizona, I think has the Democratic Party in a good position in this state, and Mark Kelly is helping boost enthusiasm here for Joe Biden. I'm still going to label it tilt because we haven't seen some of the correlation between the Joe Biden campaign potentially feeding off of all this energy with Martha McSally. I think what we are, and it's very interesting to say that because both Martha McSally and Donald Trump are both very unpopular incumbents. And so, having 2 very unpopular incumbent GOP figures, one of them, Donald Trump, is outperforming the other, Martha McSally. So that's why in our Senate election prediction videos, the characterization for that Senate race has often been likely, whereas this one is only tilt. All right, now in the state of Montana, this is obviously another state that has so much going on here. There was an article that came out in one of the Montana papers recently that talked about how voters in this state are just they've been so overtaxed with political campaigning here. Why? Well, it's because there are 4 different races happening in this state. and all of them kind of overlap. There's the presidential race, which is, of course, the only one we're really talking about here, but there's the gubernatorial race, there's the House race, the lone House race, and the senatorial race. You got 4 different things going on here, and all 3 of the statewide races, with the exception, all 3 of the real statewide races, whereas the presidential one is, a little bit different in nature, all feature candidates that currently occupy an office or have been, mainstays and figures and are running for other office. Okay, so it's you can see how voters are starting to get a little confused who's running for what. There's all this difference. They're all kind of representing the same state, all that. But on the presidential level, I do think Joe Biden will do pretty well in this state because, as we know, Montana has long been a state that Democrats can have a lot of success in. And can really be competitive with the Republican Party. It is very possible, guys. The polling doesn't quite back this up, but it is very possible, no doubt, that Donald Trump could win the state by 20 points, and the state of Montana could be represented in Washington by 2 Democratic senators and have a Democratic governor and a Democratic House member. Okay, so it is really worth watching this state in 2020, and but on the presidential level, it's still going to be safe for Donald Trump. Wyoming will also go safe. Now, in Colorado, the Republican Party has pretty much lost any and all hope of winning in this state. Cory Gardner, the current incumbent GOP senator, is the last sort of vestige of GOP politics in the state, and he is, the writing's on the wall. I think all of us can probably tell where that race is ending up. He is going to be, in all likelihood, unseated by John Hickenlooper, the former governor, who briefly ran for president and is now challenging Cory Gardner for the Senate. But in all likelihood, I think the fact that in Colorado, the first openly gay governor in the United States was elected here, Jared Polis, he replaced John Hickenlooper, of course, relinquished his seat to run for president. So that really goes to show you, anytime you fill an open seat with the same party as he did before, that pretty much gives you a taste of what that state is doing. So this is going to be safe for the Democrats, as will New Mexico. There's an open Senate seat going on here. I don't think that the Republicans have much of a shot here. North Dakota, not really much to talk about. Kevin Cramer was able, to defeat and unseat Heidi Heitkamp 2 years ago, just as Ken Conrad, after years of him representing the state in the Senate. Remember, the Democrats for a long time had senators in these sort of traditional GOP states, but they've definitely shifted to the right, just as South Dakota has and Nebraska has. Now, in Kansas, there's obviously a relatively competitive Senate race here between Barbara Bollier and the Representative Roger Marshall. Of course, Robert Bollier, a former Republican, has crossed over to the other side of the aisle. Remember, the Republicans kind of dodged a bullet when they were able to prevent Chris Kobach, who lost the gubernatorial race there in 2018 to a Democrat, which was shocking in and of itself. They were able to prevent him from becoming the Senate nominee. It's now Roger Marshall, a much more regular sort of run-of-the-mill Republican. He'll probably win. There is some polling that shows that race could be close, but he'll probably be fine. But on the presidential level, I'm still going to label it safe, as will Oklahoma. Again, Oklahoma and West Virginia, the only 2 states in the country in which Donald Trump won every single county. All right, now in the state of Texas. Polling has been consistent in this state, and it has not deviated much at all. It is very tight in this state, okay? It is, Donald Trump, I think, has barely been able to maintain now just a steady lead back around like July-ish. It was basically a tie, and there was that one poll, I believe it was a public policy polling poll, I'm going to have to look that up, that had Joe Biden up by 5 points. But since then, Donald Trump has been able to put together enough 2-point, 1.3-point wins in this state to where he's just about got a steady, very small within the margin of error lead. But it is consistent, okay? And at the end of the day, these states do have an identity. Turnout is going to be very high in this state, okay? The Democratic Party is very, very, very energized in this state. Of course, as we know, Beto O'Rourke came close in 2018, although, of course, look, at the same time, that does go to show you, it was a Democratic wave year. It was a very moderate Democratic candidate who raised a ton of money, who visited all 254 counties of the state, in a state that is shifting to the left, in a state that has a lot of immigrants in it who justifiably, I think, not a political statement, I just think justifiably were, a little bit fired up about some of the rhetoric we've seen, things of that nature. From both sides, by the way, okay, really from both sides. I think both parties have had a direct, impact on how those voters may feel, but we do know that most of them side with the Democratic Party, and they were going against a deeply unpopular GOP incumbent, and Ted Cruz still won by about 2 points. So I think that kind of goes to show you, while Joe Biden has been spending a lot of money here, and I think that the Democrats do believe they have a chance here, and I don't think it would be terribly surprising should Joe Biden win here on election night, but these states have an identity, and I still think it's going to go tilt red. Minnesota, the Republicans have sort of lost any and all hope of winning this state. Donald Trump lost it by less than 2 points in 2016. Hillary Clinton came away with it with only a plurality of the vote. But at the end of the day, look, I mean, there's not really reason to believe that, after what we saw in 2018 when the Democrats swept the midterms there, both Senate seats and the governorship, I don't really think the Republicans have any reason to believe they can actually win here, combined with steady polling showing Joe Biden far enough ahead and Tina Smith far enough ahead to where I think both of them are going to be fine. And as a result, I'm not going to label it safe, but I will label it likely for the Democrats. Now in Iowa, another state that's very hard to figure out because you have sort of these split decisions. The Democrats are the ones controlling the House here. They have 3 of the 4 House districts here. The Iowa House delegation, that is, not the Iowa House. Meanwhile, the Republicans have the governorship here when Kim Reynolds, a Republican, defeated Fred Hubbell in a much closer election, by the way, than what we saw in the presidential race. And then, of course, Charles Grassley, who may retire, and Joni Ernst to represent the 2 senators. So it's sort of a little bit of a split decision, even though it kind of leans rightward. However, Joni Ernst is in deep trouble, as she is potentially going to be unseated. And in fact, as we have seen in my recent senatorial election prediction videos, I think Teresa Greenfield is actually going to end up winning that race. But as of now, polling has been consistent, showing Donald Trump a small lead, but a lead. In Missouri, of course, this used to be a very close state. Barack Obama in 2008 lost it by only 4,000 votes. We have seen studies, I've talked about them before, how if all of Kansas City was in Kansas, it would or in Missouri, it would actually be a blue state. And if all of St. Louis was in Missouri and not half of it in Illinois, it would also be a blue state. But that's just not the case now. It's going to be a safe state, as will Arkansas and Louisiana. All right, now in Mississippi, turnout's going to be pretty high. As we know, this is the highest minority population state in the country. Mike Espy, I think, is also boosting turnout for the Democratic Party. He's doing all he can. He's probably still going to end up coming up short against Cindy Hyde-Smith, who, of course, doesn't have that little bit of controversy surrounding her this time, as she did in that special election when she won about 54 to 46% of the vote. So just as a margin characterization, I'm going to label this likely, just as I will in Alabama, because, again, in these 2 states, I think turnout's going to be very high. Now, in Florida, Donald Trump was in really bad shape here over the summer. Okay, he was in really, really bad shape here. June, July, August, he was really getting pummeled in the state of Florida. He's made it a lot closer since then. We've seen some polls that are, very close within the margin of error. I think even a few that have had him tied with Joe Biden. So there's clearly some, that inertia with Joe Biden just leading by double digits has definitely gone away. And I think that Donald Trump, this being his home state, and of course we have seen a number of times in this state how polling has suggested one thing and it's ultimately come down to it being another. So I think Donald Trump is going to outperform the polls just a little bit here, although at the end of the day, Joe Biden is, leading by a pretty considerable margin here. And so I think I'm going to label this tilt Democrat, because we are seeing, even though Bill Nelson and Andrew Gillum led on election night 2 years ago, the fact of the matter is they were not leading by as much as Joe Biden is leading. A ton of money has been poured into the state by the Democratic Party, as well as by Mike Bloomberg, by the way. And I do think that is actually going to help Joe Biden's campaign. Turnout is going to be very high in this state, as you know. And in a state where the margins are this close, I think boosted turnout is going to really do Donald Trump in. In the state of Georgia, I think it's very similar to Iowa and Texas. Joe Biden just can't quite break through. Earlier on in the campaign season, we saw a number of polls that had him leading Donald Trump by 2-3 points. But since then, kind of similar to Florida, it's kind of gone back the other way. There are 2 Senate races here also happening that are both competitive all of a sudden. So I think that is also going to, take into effect. I will say this, though. While I am predicting Donald Trump to win this, it is going to be airtight. He's going to squeak this one out. And I do not be surprised if Joe Biden comes away with 49% of the vote here. Okay, it's going to be really, really close. And again, kind of similar to Texas. I wouldn't be totally surprised if Joe Biden actually shocks the world and comes out winning this race in Georgia. South Carolina, it's going to be safe on the presidential level. Lindsey Graham and Jamie Harrison is a real race right now, but Lindsey Graham, I think, is a little bit different in this scenario because he is such a deeply unpopular figure in that state, and Jamie Harrison has been such an upstart candidate and has raised he has more money than he can even spend in that state right now. So I'm not really sure, that Joe Biden has really prioritized this state obviously as much as Jamie Harrison has. So it's going to be safe, as will Tennessee. We're long since the days now of Al Gore and um, Phil Bredesen, who of course ran for Senate in 2018 and didn't come even close to winning. Now in North Carolina, there was a good result for Joe Biden today. That had him a public policy poll that had him up by 4 points, and that's a welcome sign for him because it had been a little while since we saw some congruency between his polling status and that of Roy Cooper, the current governor of North Carolina, as well as the two House districts down in here right along the border with South Carolina that are expected to flip from red to blue. So meanwhile, the senatorial race here has been thrown into limbo. Okay, both Senate candidates, that is, the incumbent Thom Tillis and Cal Cunningham, the Democratic challenger, have seen some bad things happen to their campaign over the last 10 days. In Senator Tillis's case, he tested positive for coronavirus, although I would say that pales in comparison to what Cal Cunningham is now dealing with, and that is the sudden revelation of texts of a rather explicit nature between him and a campaign aide out in California. Of course, that woman is not his wife, we must point out. So that has thrown that Senate seat up into limbo just a little bit. Meanwhile, though, I think what we were seeing is while Cal Cunningham was doing so well in the polls, and we don't know yet where that stands, he and Roy Cooper, the current governor, they were both doing very, very well, and they were outperforming Joe Biden. It was basically in a tie, if not just a little bit behind Donald Trump. However, that one poll today is a big result for Joe Biden, and as a result, I think that's going to put him in a tilt position now, which is a huge characterization for the Biden campaign. Kentucky is going to be a safe Republican retention, as will West Virginia. Virginia, on the other hand, is also going to be a safe Democratic retention. They have flipped the script in this state for good. They control the state legislature. Both senators are Democrats. The governor, Mark Warner, is facing a moderately, stiff challenge from Daniel Gade, but not enough to really consider it, even a likely lean scenario. This is going to be a safe Democratic state on all levels. In Illinois, Dick Durbin is also going to help boost the turnout here. It was not really in question anyway. Hillary Clinton won it with a very convincing margin. State of Indiana is kind of the opposite. It used to be a state that the Democrats could be competitive in as recently as 2018 when they had that Democratic senator, that being Joe Donnelly. Of course, Barack Obama won it in 2008 as well. Now in Ohio, the Republican Party was very, very happy to see the results that they got here in 2016 when Donald Trump won and won comfortably out here. And then since then, the races have tightened up when Mike DeWine defeated Richard Cordray in a governorship race, albeit a tighter one, as well as Sherrod Brown, on the other, who he was a very popular incumbent Democratic senator, but even so, he only won with about 54% of the vote. So the Republicans are definitely in good shape here, although polling has been very kind to Joe Biden. Very kind. A poll just today from a very high-ranked pollster has them tied, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. So clearly, this state is up for grabs a little bit. The Democratic Party's been pushing a lot of resources into the state. Of course, Sherrod Brown, not that long ago, even predicted that Joe Biden would win this state. Now, that may be a little bit of a homerism thing going on here, but right now I can still only label this tilt, and that sort of gives you a sense. These four states, Donald Trump loses any of these four, I mean, there's not much of a path for him to win, let alone, losing Florida and Arizona and North Carolina. So clearly the momentum is with the Biden campaign, but they obviously still have a long way to go. They still need 74 votes here. But they're going to pick up 10 of them in Maryland and 3 more in D.C., just as they'll pick up 3 in Delaware, of course, a state that Joe Biden represented in the Senate for ages. So let's go west to east here. In the state of Wisconsin, we've seen so much evidence to back up the fact that I think Joe Biden is ultimately going to prevail in this state. Remember, this was really the only state where it was a big wow factor that we saw, where the polls were just dead wrong in 2016. That's sort of been a popular trope that we've seen over the last 4 years, and that the polls were wrong. Well, they really weren't. In fact, they were only wrong in a couple states, one of which was the fact that it was characterized on election day to go for Donald Trump, that being Nevada, although we've outlined before how in the state of Nevada, Republicans are very, very often overstated here. Whereas in Wisconsin, Hillary Clinton led by over 6 points on election day and actually lost. That was the only one, if we're being honest, that it was just a total shocker. Okay, so however, since then, the Democrats picked up a state Senate seat in a very, very conservative district, kind of down here in the southern portion of the state. First time a Democrat has represented that district in decades. That was the first sign. The next sign was the midterms. Okay, in 2018, Tammy Baldwin, the incumbent Democratic senator, won by 11 points, and they were able to unseat the gubernatorial race there. They flipped it. Scott Walker, a very well-known national figure in GOP politics, not just in Wisconsin, was defeated, okay, by Tony Evers. That was a big result for the Democratic Party. That was a huge win for them. That was a state that, if you could sort of pick one governorship that they were hoping to flip, it was that one. Okay, and then there was a Supreme Court race in this state earlier this year that the Democrats won, despite active, overt, self-admitted voter suppression efforts by the Republicans. Those aren't my words. Those are, the state GOP basically said that. Okay, word for word. You can look this up. There were 180 polling sites in Milwaukee alone they were reduced to five. Okay, so that's incredible. It's less than 3% or whatever of all polling places in Milwaukee, and the Democrats still won that Supreme Court seat. So all that is to say, I think that combined with steady polling for Joe Biden has me putting this as a lean for him. In Michigan, the Donald Trump campaign has kind of waved the white flag here. Okay, we had an MSNBC report back in, I believe, July that said that the Trump campaign had all but given up on the state of Michigan. It was very similar to Wisconsin in that there were two statewide races here in the 2018 midterms that the Democrats won, holding on to a incumbency when Debbie Stabenow was able to defeat John James, who was now subsequently giving it another shot against the other Democratic Senator Gary Peters. And then, coinciding with that retention in the Senate for the Democrats, they were also able to flip the governorship, just as they did in Wisconsin when Gretchen Whitmer was able to defeat Bill Schuette. That was an open seat, but the Democrats still flipped it from red to blue. That also, combined with steady polling leads for Gary Peters and for Joe Biden, have me labeling this as likely Democratic. And so you can pretty much see there's virtually no path already here for Donald Trump towards the presidency. In the state of Pennsylvania, this one's a little tighter, I think, than those two. But again, Scrappy Scranton Joe, this is where he's from originally. Also, just like Michigan and Wisconsin, there were two statewide races in the 2018 midterms that the Democrats won. Governor Tom Wolf won in 2018, won re-election. Bob Casey Jr. won re-election. This is a pivotal Senate seat the Democrats are targeting in 2022. Pat Toomey could be very vulnerable. Again, he won in 2016. That was such a banner night for the GOP, as we know. Joe Biden has led in this state, okay, pretty consistently. Okay, he's got a long way to go, but he has led consistently here. And so I'm only going to label this tilt because I think this is one that both sides are fighting over viciously. But I do think Joe Biden's going to pull it out. In the state of New Jersey, that's going to put him over 270. Connecticut will give him another 7. Rhode Island will give him another 4. In Massachusetts, we finally know who the Democratic Senate candidate will be as of early September, that being Ed Markey, who will win re-election as opposed to Joe Kennedy. And then, of course, in the state of New York, this is obviously going to be a safe Democratic retention. Joe Biden's now well over 300. Vermont, even though, as we know, it has the Republican governorship, will remain in the Democratic column. Now, in New Hampshire, the Republican Party, I do think, has reason to believe that they, can at least be competitive here, as this was the closest of all 50 states 4 years ago. And, of course, it was even closer than that on the senatorial level when Maggie Hassan was able to flip one Senate seat. Remember, people do kind of lose sight of the fact that even though it was a banner day for the Republicans that night, the Democrats actually flipped 2 Senate seats. Okay, they flipped one here in New Hampshire and one in Illinois. They just couldn't flip the Senate altogether. They lost a couple big races, Russ Feingold in Wisconsin, among others, and Marco Rubio in Florida. And moving forward, I think that this is a Senate race to pay attention to in 2 years when Maggie Hassan is up again. and could potentially face Chris Sununu, a very, very popular incumbent GOP governor who could challenge Maggie Hassan for the Senate, and the Republicans might win that race. But Jeanne Shaheen, the other senator, is up for re-election this year. She's going to be just fine, and polling has very, very much suggested that Joe Biden has nothing to worry about here. He's going to be just fine. That's going to be a safe retention. And then in Maine, again, folks, I want to apologize again. I forgot about it when I got earlier. There's still an issue with the characterization here on the Nebraska district line, because we have seen polling that shows the district in there between Lincoln and Omaha could go to Joe Biden. Okay, so that's very big. But just because I can't characterize it here, and because it still will be very tight, I didn't even mention it then. Going forward, if this doesn't get fixed, we will just start characterizing it verbally, and you can just imagine that this is one vote bigger for Joe Biden. But in Maine, for whatever reason, this is working. I think that I think this will hold true to form, and Joe Biden will pick up 3 of the 4 votes, just as he did last time, because I just don't think that either side has put too much effort into this, with the exception of the Senate race here. But that is so different, from like Susan Collins is such a maverick, given her bipartisanship and everything. So it's a little hard to draw sort of an analogous line there, and see any correlation developing. So there's your map, 333 to 205. Obviously, look, you can kind of tell this has been a consistent theme going on. We've made one change, that's it, and that's being North Carolina. I'm flipping back from red to blue because of that poll we saw today that kind of put it over the top for Joe Biden. So there you go. Biden flips Florida, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, North Carolina. I mean, that kind of tells you the state of this race with only 29 days left. Donald Trump, there's not much left to do, okay? And he had to take a break from campaigning because of his run-in with the coronavirus. So there you go. Joe Biden flips 101 votes compared to what Hillary Clinton was able to do 4 years ago. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please hit the subscribe button if you have not already. As always, please comment down in the suggestions below. If you want to correct me on something, again, this is all extemporaneous. I'm not looking at any information. I just want to try to communicate this information as efficiently and quickly and succinctly as I can to you guys. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Please ask any questions necessary. As you guys know, I will answer them. I just won't mention you by name because of a certain, there are laws about that. But please do, and I'll try to answer them in my next video. And stay tuned for our 1 month out senatorial election prediction video. So thank you guys so much again for watching, and I'll see you in November.